Have you noticed it? There is a curse on modern TV shows. Whether it's Game of Thrones, Dexter, or Lost, to name a few. Epic TV shows just can't seem to create an ending that is largely considered to be satisfactory. But did you ever stop to think why this is the case? Art is subjective, but why are there so many objectively bad endings? Well, let's try and get to the bottom of this strange phenomenon. Great shows often hook audiences in right from the beginning, and even if they fail to do so, the premise is intriguing enough to keep them coming back for more. This leads to a build-up in anticipation, as the audience is on the edge of their seats, eagerly waiting for whatever happens next. The downside to all this anticipation is that the writers need to deliver a conclusion that serves as a worthy payoff for all that waiting. Clearly, that has proven to be a monumental task. One of the most notorious examples to illustrate this point would be the TV show Lost. To give a brief summary, the plot revolves around a group of passengers who end up on an unknown island after their plane crashes. Throughout the show, they unravel the mysteries of the island, as well as learning more about themselves. Audiences were captivated by the slow unraveling of the plot, and the twists and turns that kept them guessing. Why was there a polar bear on a tropical island? What caused the plane to crash? And what do the numbers mean? These were questions that were no doubt the subject of many water cooler conversations. But if you ask anyone who watched the show, they'll tell you that the 6-season journey had a far from satisfactory ending. Many questions were left unanswered, and the final destination of the main characters was a bit too ambiguous for most people to accept. It seemed that the writers of the show had written themselves into a trap, creating a maze of intrigue that they themselves couldn't solve.
Well, that's just lazy writing.
Of course, we can't mention build-up without talking about one of the most successful shows of all time, Game of Thrones. The epic fantasy series spanned 8 seasons and captivated audiences of all walks of life, regardless of whether they were originally fans of the genre. The multi-narrative explored fascinating characters that had their own agendas and parts to play as they navigated a world of politics, betrayal, violence, and uneasy alliances. All these aspects were heading to the answer of the all-important question that lingered in the audience's mind: who will be seated on the Iron Throne by the show's conclusion? Now, with a story that has so many fan favorites, it would be impossible to have a conclusion that would satisfy everyone. However, there was an overwhelming sense of disappointment, as character arcs were either abruptly brought to an end, or just thrown out of the window completely. The Long Night, a wintry event that had been teased for the entire run of the show, had one main battle that was relegated to a single episode. There was a severe lack of payoff in the way that the final season unfolded.
That's it? That was just a bunch of—
In a similar vein, the TV show Dexter also fell victim to this problem. It revolved around a forensic blood spatter analyst, who was also a serial killer that targets criminals. Dexter's main arc of evolving beyond his sociopathic tendencies was very compelling, but the overall quality of the storylines seemed to take a nosedive after around the 4th season. The final nail in the coffin was the climax of the show. Dexter's foul-mouthed sister Deborah, who had long been a fan favorite, was killed off needlessly, and Dexter fakes his death so he can run away to become a lumberjack. Clearly, the backlash from fans registered with HBO, as years later, they decided to do another final season, hoping to give the character a more favorable send-off. Ultimately, Dexter is killed off by his son, Harrison, who has developed the same sociopathic tendencies. While this still caused division amongst fans, one could argue that there is a sense of poetic justice, and that could be considered satisfying enough. As time goes on, Storytelling mechanics and plot devices become more recognizable, even amongst audience members who don't consider themselves to be media literate. Storytellers have caught on to this, and so try their best to subvert our expectations. While this may seem to be the natural progression in the art of storytelling, it has also proven to be detrimental. Once again, to illustrate this point, I turn to Game of Thrones. It is a show that has become infamous for the fact that none of the characters are safe. Fan favorites and archetypal protagonists are not exempt from being killed off suddenly or even unceremoniously. This was very refreshing for audiences who feel like they have grown tired of cliches and overdone story tropes. But we must remember, cliches and expectations exist for a reason, and to subvert these factors does not guarantee a quality result. At the end of the long journey that fans experienced with the show, they were left dissatisfied with the unnecessary twists on a path that seemed to have a clear destination. Jon Snow was denied the chance to deliver the finishing blow to the Night King. Jaime Lannister abandons his path of redemption. Bran Stark winds up being the one who sits on the Iron Throne, despite the fact that his character had no intention or even logical reason to claim that position. Storytellers are so desperate to create endings that cannot be predicted, they end up making endings that don't make sense. Television has never been a fully reliable industry. A lot of shows barely get beyond the pilot episode, and even shows that have proven to be popular or have a dedicated fan base can still get cancelled at any moment. Creativity often lives and dies at the changing winds of fate. Naturally, this has a huge effect on how shows can end. Netflix's live-action adaptation of the incredible anime Cowboy Bebop had certain elements of the storyline altered, with the clear intention of creating another season. However, as the show was cancelled after one season, the already divisive change meant that the ending was far from satisfying. Alternatively, HBO was more than happy to allow the Game of Thrones showrunners, David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, more episodes in their final season. However, the showrunners wanted to wrap the season up in a mere 6 episodes so that they could move on to new projects. Needless to say, this rush more than likely contributed to the drop in quality of the show. So how do we avoid this? Writers need to have more faith in the product that they have created. The audience is invested in the story for a reason, and they certainly aren't shy about explaining the reason why. All someone needs to do is go on the internet, and strangers will explain, for free, what shows they like and why they like them, and vice versa for all the hate out there. I suppose what I'm trying to say is, there's no need to change what is already working. The desire to have a twist, to create an ending that audiences won't guess until the last minute, is detrimental to the natural progression of a storyline. Studios need to overcome their fear of being similar to other pieces of fiction. Obviously, imagination and creativity drive the industry forward. But there is a reason why certain story beats invoke satisfaction from the audience. Endings may not necessarily be happy, but they should feel earned. It's great to drive home the point that the good guys don't always win in the end, but sometimes that's exactly what we want. If mystery and intrigue is the name of the game, then at least make sure you've planned it down to the last detail, way before the conclusion arrives. Respect the audience enough to know that they are right in having their expectations, and respect the characters enough to let them see the natural end of their evolution.
There's nothing in the world more powerful than a good story. Nothing can stop it. No enemy can defeat it. And who has a better story than Bran the Broken?